When Alex Box was growing up, she was greatly challenged by maths in terms of fear and understanding. This is not an uncommon story for many. Step forward many years, Alex is now a maths education specialist and founder of Maths Play. Think about it, maths? Think again. Stay with us and hear Alex's story about discovering a love for maths. Welcome, Alex. Great to have a chat with you this morning.
Thanks, Ian, for having me.
Alex, you speak openly about how it wasn't until later in life, well beyond your school years, that you discovered a positive, playful and empowering version of mathematics. Can you describe how your current experience of maths compares with your earlier one?
Yeah, thanks. One of the biggest lessons I've learned through this process is that there's just so much more to maths than I ever really appreciated. So much more than the school experience offered me, and I'd say many of my peers. So yeah, you asked me how my current experience of maths compares with an earlier one, and there are many things I could talk about, but I'll share three that feel the most important. So before, when I was a student and a young adult, my experience of maths lacked meaning, and it was typically one of isolation. So despite the fact that going to school and being with 20 to 30 other kids each day, the mathematical learning interactions I had were really only between myself, my worksheet or my textbook, and the teacher. And it was very much about working quietly at the desk, solving problems individually, doing homework on my own at home. And later in life, in recent years, through my teacher training and opportunities, I've been able to spend some time doing maths with other teachers. And these are really social classes where we spend time thinking and exploring a pattern or a problem on our own, but we also spend a lot of the time discussing with each other the things we're finding difficult to get our head around, the things that we're noticing that we're curious about, whether it might be useful to solve the problem, sharing patterns we've uncovered or something we've tried that didn't work. Or did work to help us. So it's for me personally, it's become a really social and community experience, and that is a real contrast to my experience of maths growing up and navigating the world until I got into teaching and had some of these opportunities. And I do think that the lack of community in the maths experience is probably largely responsible for making maths quite a daunting and overwhelming experience for me. And I know that many teachers across Australia and the world are having access to this kind of professional learning in maths now, but access to collaborative maths, which really fosters social connections, I don't think is the norm. I think there's still a way to go, but that would be the first major difference, is moving from an experience of isolation to one that's I feel really connected with others, and I learn with and from others through playing with different mathematics. The second thing I would say that's been really important for me is discovering that maths is a really highly visual subject. Something that a lot of people say when they're struggling to understand something conceptual is, oh, I'm a visual learner. And I used to say this all the time. It was my way of explaining myself or taking responsibility for the fact that I didn't understand or was finding some of these concepts really difficult. And about 7 years ago, I read some neuroscience about the brain and how it works when we're thinking mathematically, when we're doing maths. And we have about 5 areas in the brain that are activated when they're doing maths or trying to do maths. And 2 of these 5 centers are visual centers, which essentially think in pictures. And so the other thing that I've learned that's related to this and is really exciting to me is that almost every maths concept taught in school, if not all of them, can be visually explained and using visual models. And so with access to visual explanations, I've been able to understand concepts that I just didn't before. So things like operating with fractions. I'd be trying to remember some rule about flipping some numbers or something, and I'm not good at remembering facts like that. So actually understanding what's happening when I'm multiplying fractions with a visual model just opened up, and it really boosted my confidence. So that Understanding algebra too. Again, having visual models, it blew me away. Like, I have to say, I keep forgetting this, and then I have these conversations. I remember that the first time I understood algebra, I created my own algebraic equation and I cried because I was so moved. So yeah, it's also, this visual stuff has also really helped me to appreciate and the confidence that I've gotten from these visual experiences has made me more likely to stick with problems because I know that there's going to be a way to understand it. So that visual element is very different to it being really quite an abstract subject for me throughout my life until this point. And then just the last thing I'll mention is probably the most important, actually, and it speaks to the creative nature of maths. And the term creative maths will seem like an oxymoron to many people. It certainly would have been to me if I'd ever heard it. But yeah, the most transformative lesson for me was learning that there's always more than one way to solve a problem efficiently. Someone was talking earlier about how they weren't allowed to use calculators in school, and so they actually learned to operate with numbers mentally using mental strategies. And when they're on the go, I loved hearing about how you keep track of your grocery total. And that's the sort of thing I do now because it's fun and I can do it because I've learned strategies and I've learned that there's more than one way to solve a problem. I don't always need to have a calculator or a pencil and paper to do, that boring vertical method. So there's ownership when I can choose how I want to solve my problems, and I do it all the time now for fun. I've learned different arithmetic strategies. I can flex my analytical and evaluative thinking skills to decide which strategies feel good, that I like the most, that I'm confident with. And having access to lots of different ways of seeing a problem has really given me just mathematical freedom, if you like. It's ultimately strengthened my everyday numeracy skills. And these continue to develop because tinkering with better and more efficient ways of navigating everyday life is really motivating for me. So how does my current experience compare to the other one? I've learned that maths brings people together. It's deeply collaborative and social. I've learned that it's highly visual, that it's completely normal for mathematicians to use visual models to support and extend their mathematical theories. And that most transformative for me and my confidence, there's always more than one way to solve a math problem efficiently.
So as you were describing that earlier, Alex, about your isolation in maths, that must have been a bit of a lonely time. But as you went on with your story and you talked about how it was, you understood it can be highly visual in the learning, but also the level of creative maths that you can use, but also that level of collaboration, which would have made the experience so much more enjoyable. When you're working with students today, and particularly I'm thinking for grandparents, for parents who are listening in today, because they're going to be engaged with their grandchildren or children and things that they could possibly do in the maths area. What are some of the important strategies or concepts that you use to help them to enhance their learning of maths?
Yeah, there are many things. It's exciting to be building up a bit of a toolkit that I feel like I can draw on. I'm developing fluency with that as a teacher. So of course, some of the earlier things like, ensuring visual and concrete models and experiences. There's lots of things that can be done at home like that, organizing, sorting, counting, collections, for instance, getting involved in your everyday activities. As a teacher, one of the important things I do is take time to learn what students already know and can do. And this is really important because just like there are progressions for developing literacy knowledge and skills, there are progressions for developing numeracy knowledge and skills. And often in maths teaching discussions, the metaphor of a brick wall is used. So if you build up a wall without laying all of the foundational bricks, the higher bricks won't stay up because of the gaps that are underneath. And a big problem that happens in schools is that not enough time is really spent on understanding really critical foundations deeply so that children really develop confidence and fluency with them. And this is one of the big reasons, I think, why our numeracy results aren't what they should be here in Australia, because we don't yet have a systematic approach to maths education that brings in all these really essential aspects, the visual, and also schools are just so busy. It's hard to be keeping up with everything. Lots of people are working on this, but we're not there yet in terms of, as a general society, we don't really have a healthy mathematical approach, I would say. But the other thing that I think I've become much more equipped to do is to help that homeschool connection, because families are really, they have the commitment and the time and the interest in serving their children in the best possible way. So while I still continue to do a little bit of work with schools and teachers, I am spending more time now with families, trying to find ways of sharing ideas through our monthly newsletter for families. Recognizing the valuable things that they're already doing to support their child's mathematical development is really important. So that, of course, includes the everyday things like using maths together when preparing food and scheduling activities with calendars and time, and doing some maths talk when purchasing groceries. And of course, there's tips and strategies that I can share to sort of enhance those experiences. And these activities are, I think, generally understood as a valuable way for families to support their children. But because of the very narrow maths experience that lots of adults have had, many people don't realise, and I didn't really realise until the maths play research and development work, that many of the classic games we grew up with had a really important role in fostering our mathematical development. So some of those most well-loved classic games are deeply mathematical. There's simple games like Paddocks, also known as dots and boxes, where you're making as many boxes as you can by joining dots. And that's a game that my brother would play on long car trips. Chess, of course, is deeply logical, and logical thinking is really important in maths, although it's not really been a huge priority in schools. In schools, they're just trying to get through the curriculum that's there. Scrabble is a fantastic famous word game that is deeply mathematical, involving logical thinking, spatial thinking, and it is also providing a space for arithmetic practice. Another favourite in our family was Mahjong. Monopoly, of course, brings in the financial mathematics. And I mention these because I do wonder about the role that technology has played in influencing how much time we have to play these classic kinds of games. So I do think it's important to raise them and point out that they are mathematically valuable. And there are lots of simple dice games. There's one called Greedy Pig that's really fun, and it gives kids a lot of practice using mental addition strategies, and lots of other things that are really great for families to enjoy playing with maths together. I really believe, and I've seen, that helping families understand that the words maths and play can and should go together, and helping them with ideas for how to practice and do this. I do think this will be one of the most important ways to repair that social narrative about maths as being, inaccessible, too difficult, only for some people. I think it's going to be really important for helping to create a narrative where maths is seen as playful, not painful. So yeah, those two things, really getting to know kids where they're at, ensuring those strong foundations, and supporting families with that, with positive and playful and powerful ways of playing with maths together.
And Alex, as you're talking, I can't but help think, when I had my granddaughter over the other week, we ended up being in the kitchen making cookies, and the cookies were delicious the way they turned out, by the way. But also I decided I'd put up my little two-man tent in the backyard as well. Okay, now they're two activities with lots and lots of things. I mean, in terms of the maths that you can talk about in those types of activities, which are there right in front of us. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And there's a nice little initiative that's come out of the UK called Maths Eyes, or the website is Have You Got Maths Eyes? And it's all about raising awareness among communities, school communities and the general community about all of the maths around us, and tuning into that. So actually, I did publish the latest family newsletter and sent that out yesterday, and I featured a section on Maths Eyes and some ideas about how talking and noticing maths. I gave a visual example of some shelves with stacks of towels and all of the maths involved.
Alex, really enjoyed chatting with you this morning. Your story, I believe, will touch a lot of people, and there's lots of common denominators there. I'm sure there's many people out there who have had a similar experience to you. Unfortunately, probably some of them have stayed in that space of having that fear, but I really believe your conversation helps and gives people that sense of hope that, we can explore and we can feel more confident and take away that fear of maths. So thank you so much for being our guest at Monday Maths today.
You're so welcome. Thank you.